She shouted, "Get out of my house." And for the first time, I didn't argue. The ring on her finger glinted under the kitchen light, a reminder of everything she'd taken and everything I'd ignored. I walked out the door she thought she owned, but I didn't leave empty-handed. I took her secret. It was her voice that broke the morning calm, sharp, cold, and final. The kind of tone that ends conversations and bloodlines alike. I stood there in the hallway, suitcase in hand, sunlight, cutting across the floor between us, like a dividing line drawn by fate. "This is my house now," she said, chin raised high. "Ethan said so." Ethan, my son, the boy who used to wait for me on the porch every evening when I came home from work. The same porch where his wife now stood wearing confidence like armor. I didn't speak. Words would have been a waste. When someone is determined to be cruel, silence is the only mirror that shows them what they are. She stepped closer. "You heard me, didn't you get out?" Her eyes didn't even flinch when she said it. I looked past her shoulder into the living room I'd built with my own hands 20 years ago. The wooden shelves, the framed photographs, the faint scratch on the corner of the table where Ethan had carved his initials when he was 9. Everything had a story. Everything except her. I picked up my coat, slow and calm. "If this is your house," I said softly, "you should fix the leaky pipe in the basement. The one behind the heater." She frowned, confused. "What pipe? You'll find out soon enough." I didn't wait for her answer. I stepped outside. The air was colder than I expected. Behind me, the door slammed shut like a gavel in a courtroom I never agreed to enter. I walked down the driveway past the oak tree Ethan and I planted when he was 12. The roots had cracked the concrete now, nature's quiet way of reclaiming what man forgets. As I reached the street, I saw Ethan's car parked under the shade. He was sitting inside, head down, eyes on his phone. He didn't look up when I passed. I knocked gently on the window. He hesitated, then rolled it down halfway. "Dad," he said. His voice carried guilt, disguised as exhaustion. "It's just temporary. Okay, Clara's under a lot of stress." "I see," I said calmly. She didn't mean it like that. She said what she meant. And I heard it. He looked away, jaw tight. "Please don't make this harder." "I'm not," I replied. "I'm making it honest." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between father and son is heavier than anger. It's inheritance without will. Finally, he muttered, "We'll talk later." "I doubt it," I said, stepping back. "You don't listen anymore." Then I turned and walked away. I didn't go far. I stopped at the corner of the street, the same spot from which I'd once watched Ethan ride his first bike, wobbling and laughing. The same corner from which I now watched my son's wife close the blinds of my house. The irony wasn't lost on me. Life has a strange symmetry. You build, you give, you trust, and one day You stand outside your own creation, uninvited. But as I stood there, something inside me settled instead of shattered. I realized she hadn't kicked me out of my home. She'd freed me from a lie. That evening, I checked into a small inn at the edge of town, a quiet place near the highway where no one knew my name. The receptionist asked, "How long will you be staying?" I smiled faintly. "Until I remember who I was, before I started apologizing for existing." In the dim light of the room, I unpacked slowly, one shirt, one notebook, one photograph of Mary, my late wife. The silence felt clean, honest. Before I went to bed, I took out the photograph, Mary and me standing in front of that same house, 20 years younger, unaware of all the storms to come. I whispered to her picture, "I kept my promise, love. I built him a home. I just didn't know someone else would live in it." The night outside was calm. No arguments, no raised voices, only the sound of distant rain, soft, steady, forgiving. As I turned off the lamp, I thought of Clara's words again. "Get out of my house." And for the first time, they didn't sting. Because when you've spent a lifetime giving everything, sometimes the only way to reclaim your peace is to walk away with nothing except the truth. When the door closed behind me, the silence followed like a second skin. The night was colder than it should have been. The air smelled like rain and betrayal. I stood there on the porch, a man no longer welcome in the house he built, and let that truth sink in without anger, just gravity. People think silence is peace. It's not. Sometimes silence is the sound of everything collapsing quietly. I'm right. I walked down the stone path toward the gate, each step heavier than the last. Rufus, no. Ethan, my son, stayed behind. I could see his shadow through the window, still frozen where I left him. He didn't come after me. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he didn't want to choose. I didn't blame him. Love can turn even the wisest men into strangers. My truck waited at the curb, same one I'd driven for 15 years. When I opened the door, the smell of sawdust and old leather greeted me, the only things left that still felt like mine. I sat there for a long while, listening to the rain starting to fall on the windshield, the drops catching light from the porch. Behind that window, she was probably comforting him already, spinning her version of the story. She just doesn't feel safe with your father around. She needs space. She's emotional. I could already hear the words she'd use to rewrite what just happened. When I finally turned the key, the engine started with a sigh. I didn't drive far, just down to the riverfront, where the city slept in amber light. Portland, Opie looked softer in the rain, like it was forgiving itself or something. I parked there watching reflections dance across the water. My phone buzzed. One message. "Ethan, Dad, let's talk tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word carried more uncertainty than promise. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the glove compartment, pulled out a small black notebook, the one my wife Mary had given me years ago. Inside were sketches, fragments, reminders of who I used to be before the house turned into a battlefield. Tonight, it became something else evidence. I wrote a single line on the first empty page. She said it's her house. Let's find out whose truth it really is. The next morning, I returned not inside the house, but to the street across from it. I parked beneath a sycamore tree, half hidden by its branches. Old habit from my site inspection days. Observer from distance before you intervene. Clara's car was already gone. Ethan's wasn't. I waited an hour before he came out. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. He spotted my truck but didn't come closer, just raised a hand, hesitant, guilt-heavy, then walked away. Sometimes I think silence isn't what breaks a man. It's the moments when the people he loves stop meeting his eyes. By noon, I went to see Robert Chen. He'd always been more than a lawyer, an old friend who knew when to listen instead of speak. He opened his office door and blinked in surprise. "John, you look like hell." I smiled faintly. I was evicted. He frowned. "What happened by my son's wife?" He let out a low whistle. "That's a first." I told him everything, the deed, conversation, the manipulations, the final confrontation. He listened in silence, fingers steepled under his chin. When I finished, he leaned back. "You were right to walk out. Sometimes staying is how they win." "Still," I said quietly, "there's something wrong with her story. She's hiding something. I just don't know what yet." He nodded. "Then find it, but do it cleanly. You don't want to look like the bitter father." "I won't," I said. "I'll look like the man who built that house and knows where every crack runs." That night I stayed at a small inn by the river, the kind of place where people mind their own business. The owner, an old woman named Beth, offered me tea. "Rough night?" she asked. "Rough years," I replied. She smiled softly. "Tea won't fix it, but it helps you remember warmth still exists." I sat by the window, sipping slowly, watching the city lights through the rain. For the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't angry. Anger burns, clarity builds, and clarity was finally coming back to me. When the phone rang again, I almost didn't answer. But the caller ID read Ethan. "Dad." His voice was low. "Careful. She said you threatened her." I closed my eyes. "Did she now?" "She said you tried to take the deed." "I didn't take anything, son. I just took my silence." He hesitated. "She's upset. Maybe just apologize, smooth things out." "Apologize for what?" "Breathing in my own home." He didn't answer. The silence between us stretched, brittle. "Ethan," I said finally, "has she ever told you about her past?" "What past? Exactly?" "I'm not doing this, Dad," he said, voice rising. "She's my wife. I know, and I'm your father. Then act like one. The call ended. I stared at the phone for a long time, not with anger, with something colder, understanding. He wasn't defending her. He was defending the version of her he needed to believe in. The next morning, I started my quiet work. Checked county records, property history, background filings, real estate licenses. Anything tied to the name Clara Mitchell. But when I looked closer, I found something strange, a second last name on one of the archived listings. Clara W. Dalton. I leaned back in the chair, staring at that name. Dalton. It meant nothing to me yet, but I knew enough to trust my instincts. Architects live by structure, and this one didn't add up. I printed the record, folded it into my notebook, and wrote a new line beneath the first. Her name has cracks. Outside, the rain stopped. The air smelled like iron and beginnings. Some people build walls to protect themselves. Others build them to hide behind. And I was finally starting to see which kind she was. Names are like blueprints. They tell you what was meant to be built until someone changes the design halfway through. I sat at the small oak desk in my rented room, morning light crawling across the papers I'd printed. Clara W. Dalton. Not Mitchell. Not the woman who had introduced herself to my son. Dalton was a name she had tried to bury, but like a crack under new paint, it always finds its way to the surface. When you spend a lifetime studying structures, you learn that lies have the same anatomy as buildings. Every deception has a foundation, a framework, and a roof made of performance. What keeps them standing is neglect, the refusal to inspect. I began the inspection. The county registry was public. So were corporate filings. One search led to another, and by noon, I was staring at an old case. Summary from 3 years ago. Dalton and Ward Investments. Fraud investigation closed with civil penalty. The details were sparse, but the numbers spoke louder than words. $500,000 misplaced in property transfers. The co-owner listed, Clara Dalton. My pulse didn't rise. My breathing didn't quicken. I'd learned from architecture that panic never saves collapsing walls. Observation does. Still, I needed confirmation. The document included the name of the investigating attorney, a woman named Patricia Reynolds. Her office was across town. I called, and her assistant hesitated only briefly before transferring me. Mr. Miller Reynolds said, voice clipped but professional. I remember that case. Why do you ask? She's my daughter-in-law now, I replied. Silence. Then a low exhale. Then, I hope your son is careful. We never had enough to prove intent, she settled before trial. But the pattern was there. What pattern? She partners with men in real estate ventures, convinces them to sign over assets for simplification, then liquidates when control is secure. I closed my eyes. The exact language she'd used to tell me. Cleaner, can you send me the public report? I asked. I'll email what's on record. But be discreet, Mr. Miller. She's clever, and she learns from every scheme. That night, I drove back to the old neighborhood. My house. No, her house now was dark, except for the upstairs light of my former study. I parked across the street engine, off watching shadows move through the curtain. 2 silhouettes. One was Ethan. The other wasn't. The figure was too tall, too broad. And when he left 20 minutes later, I caught the reflection of his car. In the rain-slick street, black Mercedes, tinted windows, dealer plate frame from a luxury property firm. I took a photo, time-stamped it, and whispered to no one, pattern confirmed. The next morning, I returned to see Robert. I placed the printed report and the photo on his desk. She's done this before, I said. Fraud, civil penalty, now a new partner. He leaned forward, brows tightening. You think she's planning to take the house? She already has. Now she's moving on to the next step. Robert sighed. What do you want to do? Find proof strong enough to make my son see what she is. He nodded slowly. Then start small. People like her always leave receipts. That word stayed with me, receipts. So I watched. From the quiet end of the street, from coffee shops near her office, from the edges of places she thought no one cared to look. I wasn't stalking. I was studying the blueprint of her deception. And slowly, pieces began to align. On Tuesday afternoon, she met the man from the Mercedes at a wine bar near the river. He was younger than me, older than Ethan, the type who measured success by cufflinks. Their conversation was animated, intimate. When he left, she stayed behind, making a call. I moved closer, just enough to hear her voice through the half-open terrace door. Yes, it's transferring next month. No, he won't interfere anymore. The father's out. The father's out. I felt the words settle like dust inside me. Not anger confirmation. She had drawn her line, and I had just crossed it back. That evening, I sent the photo to Patricia Reynolds, asking if she recognized the man. Her reply came an hour later. Reynolds. That's Daniel Kraus, real estate agent. He handled the liquidation for Dalton and Ward. The same man. The same playbook. The same quiet destruction dressed as opportunity. I printed her email and tucked it into my notebook beneath the line. Her name has cracks. Then added another. Every predator repeats the pattern until someone builds a wall around it. When Ethan called that night, his voice was careful, thin. Dad, Clara said she saw you near the house. Are you watching us? I'm watching the truth, I said. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know who she is. He laughed, nervously. Dad, this obsession isn't healthy. She said you're reading conspiracy sites. I'm reading court records. Silence. Listen, I continued softly, before you say anything else, tell me this has... She asked you to sign anything recently? He hesitated. That was enough. She loves me, Dad, he said finally. You wouldn't understand, you're right, I replied. Love. That needs signatures. No, I don't understand. The call ended with static. I sat in that rented room, surrounded by documents, photos, coffee cups gone cold, and thought of all the fathers who'd lost their sons, not to war or death, but to manipulation, dressed as love. There's a kind of grief that doesn't cry. It just plans. By midnight, I had assembled a folder labeled The Blueprint of Deception. Every piece of proof I had so far: public record of Clara W. Dalton, fraud investigation summary, photo with Daniel Kraus, email from Reynolds, Ethan's hesitation, not enough for confrontation, but enough to keep going. I looked out the window toward the distant glow of the city. Somewhere in that glow, my son slept beside a woman who was quietly erasing everything that bore my name. I whispered the same words I used to tell my students in architecture school. When you can't stop a collapse, at least design how it falls. Because I wasn't done yet. There's a strange kind of peace that comes after betrayal. Not the peace of acceptance, but the silence of precision. I woke up that morning and felt it. The calm before a calculation. I spent the early hours at a diner downtown, coffee black. No sugar, no noise. The waitress recognized me from before. Haven't seen you in a while, Mr. Miller, she said, refilling my cup. I've been working, I replied. Retired men don't work, she smiled. Some of us do, I said quietly. We just stopped getting paid. She laughed and walked away, and I turned my attention back to the folder in front of me, The Blueprint of Deception. Patricia Reynolds called at 9:14 a.m. sharp. John, I've reviewed your notes, she said. You're right about Kraus. He's involved with her again, unofficially, of course. So she's running the same con looks that way. But if you want this to hold up legally, you'll need hard evidence. Financial, recorded, dated. Something that links her intent to action. I can do that. Don't do it alone. I never do. I said, though I wasn't sure who with me meant anymore. After the call, I dialed an old contact from my project days, Marcus Webb, a private investigator who'd once helped a client recover stolen architectural patents. He was blunt, efficient, and allergic to small talk. When he picked his first words were, "You sound like someone looking for trouble." "I'm looking for truth," I said. "That's worse. Truth costs more. I can afford it." He paused. "Name Clara Mitchell. Real name Clara Dalton." I heard a whistle. Dalton. That's familiar. You've heard it before? Yeah. From a guy named Ward. She left him bankrupt. Then we're talking about the same woman. I met Marcus later that afternoon in a corner booth of an old bar that smelled like whiskey and history. He wore a tan coat and a face that had seen too much. He placed a small recorder on the table. "You sure you want to open this box? It's already open," I said. "Fine. Give me 3 days." For what? To find her skeletons. People like her don't bury them deep. They just decorate the grave. The next 3 days passed in quiet observation. I didn't go near the house, didn't call Ethan. I just waited. In silence, you learn what kind of man you are not by what you say, but by what you can endure. On the third night, Marcus called. "I've got something." I met him near the docks, neutral ground. He handed me a flash drive and a small envelope. "What's this bank transactions?" "2 accounts under different names, both tied to your daughter-in-law. The second one lists deposits from a company registered to Daniel Kraus. And the envelope." He smirked. "Photos? You'll want to sit down before looking." I didn't sit. I opened it right there under the streetlight. The photos were clear. Clara and Kraus meeting at a storage unit, exchanging emails. In one frame, she kissed him. Not affection confirmation. Marcus watched my expression carefully. "You okay?" "I'm not here for heartbreak," I said. "I'm here for proof." "Then you've got it." I drove back to the inn, the flash drive resting on the passenger seat like a loaded weapon. I didn't feel victory, just inevitability. Betrayal has a strange flavor when it's proven. It tastes like metal. That night, I wrote another line in my notebook. Silence isn't surrender. It's preparation. At dawn, Patricia called again. "Marcus sent me copies," she said. "This is strong evidence, John. With your permission, I can prepare a protective filing just in case she tries to sell the property or move assets." "Do it," I said. Quietly, she hesitated. "You sound calm." "I am." I finally understand her design, which is to own everything she never built. Later that day, I saw Ethan. He'd agreed to meet me at a cafe halfway between our worlds. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from defending lies you don't fully believe. "Dad," he said, sitting down, "Clara's upset. She says you're having her followed." "I'm having the truth followed," I replied. "She said you're trying to ruin her." "I don't need to. She's doing a fine job herself." He frowned. "You're wrong about her." I opened the envelope, slid a photo across the table. He froze. The color drained from his face. "Who's that?" I asked, softly. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. When he finally spoke, his voice broke somewhere between disbelief and denial. "It can't be what it looks like." "It's always what it looks like, Ethan. You just didn't want to see it." He stood shaking his head. "You set this up." "If I did," I said, "she wouldn't still be walking free." He left without another word. I didn't stop him. Some lessons can't be taught. They have to collapse. When he was gone, I whispered to the empty chair, "One day, son, you'll see that I didn't fight her for me. I fought her for the man you might still become." That night I went back to the river. The same rain, the same lights, but a different kind of quiet. The kind that comes when you realize justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathes. And I was getting closer to the truth, the one that would end it all. The storm outside had stopped, but the one inside hadn't. 3 nights after showing Ethan the photos, Patricia called again. "John, we found something new," she said. Her voice was sharper than usual, focused like she'd just opened a file that shouldn't exist. I drove straight to her office. When I arrived, she was standing by the window holding a folder wrapped with a red string. "You said she worked in real estate, right?" "Yes," well, she said, untying the string. "She's been doing more than selling houses." Inside were spreadsheets, wire transfers, shell companies, deposits from multiple names. Each line looked ordinary until you noticed the pattern. Every transaction followed the same cycle: acquire property under one alias, transfer ownership to another, liquidate, disappear. The latest entry was different. The property address was my house. I stared at the page until the numbers blurred. "She's trying to sell it." Patricia nodded. "In 2 weeks, through a holding company, under her maiden name, Dalton." I exhaled slowly. She really thought I'd disappear quietly. "She's good," Patricia said, "but arrogant. She never deletes the blueprint. She just hides it under a different name." She handed me a USB drive. "Here's everything. I can file for injunction, but it'll take time. If she moves fast, she might still get the sale through before we stop it." "Then we don't give her time," I said. That evening, I called Marcus. "She's selling the house," I told him. "I figured," he said dryly. "People like her don't collect memories. They flip them. Can you get me the buyer's info?" He whistled. "Risky. She'll know someone's digging. She already does." 2 hours later, he sent me an encrypted email. Buyer listed as Prime Equity Holdings, dummy corporation, bank tied to Kraus. The circle had closed. I printed everything, slipped it into a new envelope, and stared at it for a long time. I thought of Ethan still clinging to an illusion. He loved her, but love isn't blind, it's willfully ignorant. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window of my small in-room, notebook open, writing down every step of her design like I used to diagram support beams for skyscrapers. Foundation, manipulation through affection. Framework, property and trust. Facade, perfect marriage. Load-bearing lie, family unity. At the bottom, I wrote one more line. When beauty becomes strategy, ruin becomes inevitable. The next day, I decided to confront her not in rage, but in precision. I drove to the house mid-afternoon. She was in the garden pruning roses that didn't belong to her. She looked up, surprised, but composed. "You shouldn't be here, Mr. Miller." "I built this house," I said. I can visit its ghosts, she smirked. Ethan's not home. I didn't come to see him. Her eyes narrowed. Then say what you came to say. I held out the folder. This is your real estate portfolio, isn't it? Including the listing for this address. She froze only for a second, but long enough. Then she smiled. You've been busy. So have you. She stepped closer, voice dropping. You don't scare me. I'm not trying to, I said softly. I'm warning you. The people you play with, they don't forgive exposure easily. She tilted her head. Are you threatening me? No. I'm saving you time. It's the one resource you're about to run out of. She laughed low and cruel. You think you've won because you found a few papers, no? I said, turning toward the door. I've won because I stopped doubting myself. Her laughter followed me to the gate, brittle and hollow. That night Ethan called again. His tone had shifted, quieter, uncertain. Dad, Clara said you showed up today. I did. She's scared. She should be. He hesitated. She also said she's being framed. I didn't answer. I just sent him the file. Minutes later he texted, What is this? I replied, The woman you married. Then I turned my phone off. The next morning Patricia called one last time. We've secured the injunction, she said. She can't sell the property. For now. For now is enough, I said. She paused. John, what are you going to do next? I looked out the window at the dawn breaking over the city. Calm, gray, precise. Finish the design, I said. Then let gravity do the rest. The day of confrontation didn't come with thunder. It came with silence, the kind that hums right before something breaks. Ethan called early that morning. His voice was low, tired, and stripped of certainty. Dad, he said, we need to talk. All of us. Your idea or hers? Both, I guess. I'll be there. I didn't need directions. I'd built that house. I could have walked to it blindfolded. When I parked outside, I saw Ethan's car in the driveway, and beside it, a black Mercedes. Kraus. Of course. When I rang the bell, it was Clara who opened the door. She looked immaculate as always, pressed, blouse, calm eyes, mask, perfectly fitted. Come in, she said, tone sharp enough to cut glass. Thanks, I replied. Always to visit my own design. In the living room, Ethan sat stiffly on the couch. Kraus stood behind him, pretending to check his watch. The dynamic was clear. Clara at the center, Ethan confused Kraus in control. It wasn't a family meeting. It was a performance. Ethan gestured awkwardly. Dad, I asked you here to clear things up. I was hoping you would. Clara crossed her arms. You've been spreading lies about me, Mr. Miller. Spying, harassing, fabricating nonsense about my business. I met her gaze. Fabrications usually don't have bank records. Ethan frowned. Please, just stop fighting. I'm not fighting, I said softly. I'm explaining. I set the folder on the table and slid it toward him. Everything you need to see is here. Financial records, aliases, property transfers. The company she's selling this house to is owned by him. I pointed at Kraus. He straightened immediately. That's a ridiculous accusation. Is it? I asked. Because the registration documents show your name, Daniel. The same name listed in the Dalton and Ward case. Clara's composure cracked for half a second. Her fingers tightened around her bracelet, then relaxed. That's ancient history, she said. You're twisting things. I'm just reading what's there. Ethan looked between us, panic creeping in. What's going on, Clara? Tell me the truth, she turned to him, voice trembling perfectly on cue. He's trying to destroy us, Ethan. He's jealous. He never liked me. He wants to turn you against me. I didn't interrupt, I just waited. Stoics call it strategic silence, letting truth echo louder than denial. When she finished, I opened my phone, played a short audio file Marcus had recorded. Her voice filled the room. The father's out. Once the sales through were clear. The color drained from Ethan's face. Kraus shifted uncomfortably. Clara froze, caught between defiance and fear. Ethan whispered, Where did you get this? I didn't steal it, I said. I built it the way you build a bridge, one fact at a time. She tried to recover, but the walls were closing in. That recording is illegal. No, Patricia's voice came from behind me. She had arrived, quietly, legal folder in hand. It's admissible. And so are the documents you tried to delete last night. We retrieved them. For the first time, Clara's mask fell completely. Her voice turned sharp, desperate. You don't understand. I did what I had to. Do you think I wanted to live in this museum of a house? He was suffocating us with the past. Ethan shook his head slowly. You were suffocating me with lies. She reached for him, but he stepped back. It was over. Not with shouting, but with distance. The kind that can't be closed again. Patricia placed an envelope on the table. Mr. Kraus, I suggest you leave. You've been formally served with notice of investigation. He turned pale. Without a word, he walked out. Clara stared at me, anger, hatred, and something like admiration all mixed together. You think you've won? I met her eyes. No. I think the truth finally caught up. She laughed bitterly. You'll die alone, old man. Maybe, I said. But at least I'll die honest. She grabbed her purse and stormed out the door, slamming behind her like a gavel. Ethan sat there, hands trembling, unable to speak. I didn't push. I just placed a hand on his shoulder and said quietly, You can rebuild walls, son, but you can't rebuild trust. You have to design new foundations. He nodded, tears in his eyes, not of weakness, but of awakening. Outside, the rain started again, soft and steady. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just rains quietly, cleansing what's left standing. The day after Clara left, the house felt heavier than ever. Not because of her absence, but because of everything she'd taken that couldn't be seen. Ethan sat on the couch, the same place he'd been, when truth fell on him like glass. He hadn't spoken since last night. The silence between us was thick, the kind that only fathers and sons who've both been betrayed can understand. I made coffee. 2 cups. He didn't touch his. Finally, he whispered, "She's gone. Did you know she would run?" I hoped she wouldn't, I said quietly. But people who live on lies don't stay to watch them fall. He looked at the floor, his voice raw. "You warned me." "I didn't listen." "You listened," I said. "You just didn't believe." He nodded, a small broken motion. "I thought she loved me." "She loved what you gave her: safety, reputation, a stage. But love built on gain isn't love. It's investment." He swallowed hard, staring at his hands. "I don't even know who I am without her." "You're the same man," I said, "just lighter now. Because you're not carrying someone else's lie." The rain outside softened. Through the window, I could see the roses she used to trim every morning. They'd begun to wilt, almost relieved. "Daddy," said finally, "I don't deserve this house anymore." "No one does," I replied. "Some homes aren't meant to be inherited. They're meant to be learned from." He turned to me, eyes red, voice trembling. "How do you move on from something like this?" "You don't," I said. "You just walk through it, one quiet step at a time. Eventually, pain stops leading the way." He exhaled, long and shaky, then stood. "I'll stay with you for a while." "Good," I said. "The river's quieter than this place. It doesn't lie." We left the house that afternoon. He didn't lock the door, and I didn't ask him to. Some endings don't need closure, they need distance. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The windows reflected gray sky and rain, no movement, no shadow. Just a house emptied of its illusions. And for the first time in months, I felt no anger, no satisfaction, only calm. Because when the truth finally takes everything, what it leaves behind is peace. The cottage by the river wasn't much: 2 rooms, creaking floors, windows that sang when the wind passed through. But it was honest. Honest places have a way of healing dishonest wounds. Ethan stayed with me. At first, he barely spoke. He'd spend hours by the riverbank, skipping stones that never made it far. I didn't push. Silence had its own work to do. Every morning, I brewed coffee and left a cup on the porch rail. Sometimes he drank it, sometimes not. Healing isn't linear. It's circular, like the ripples those stones made before sinking. On the 3rd morning, he finally broke the quiet. You were right, he said softly. I never wanted to be. He nodded, eyes on the water. I thought love meant forgiving everything. It does, I said. But only after you stop pretending. He looked at me, confusion in his face. Forgiveness. I continued. Isn't about letting someone hurt you again. It's about taking your life back from what they did. He turned away, blinking hard. The river kept flowing. It didn't pause for anyone's regret. It just carried things forward. In the evenings, we'd work with our hands. I'd carve wood, he'd fix an old chair. The rhythm steadied him. Creation has always been the quietest form of revenge. One night he found my old black notebook on the table. He flipped it open, reading the scattered lines and diagrams. You still write everything down, he asked. Only what I don't want to forget. He smiled faintly. Like what? Like this, I said. Watching my son rebuild something that isn't a lie. He lowered his head, hiding the tear that escaped. I didn't mention it. Some truths don't need witnesses, only space to breathe. A week later, Patricia called. Her tone was cautious. John, there's something you should know. What is it Clara's been spotted? Nevada. She's using another name, Ellen Darnell. Working with another broker. I didn't flinch. Let her, I said. You're not pressing charges. No, the law can chase her. I don't need to. You're at peace with that. I'm at peace with not chasing ghosts. When I hung up, Ethan was standing by the doorway. He'd heard enough. So she's free, he asked. Freedom isn't always victory, I said. Sometimes it's a sentence no one else needs to enforce. He didn't answer. Just sat down, staring at his hands again. Do you think she'll ever feel sorry? He asked quietly. Guilt's like gravity, I said. It pulls eventually. You just have to stop holding it up for them. Later that night, I sat outside alone. The moonlight traced a silver path across the water, and for the first time in months, my chest didn't feel like scaffolding about to collapse. I thought about Clara, not her betrayal, but her emptiness. The kind of hunger that turns people into thieves of affection. I realized then she didn't steal from me, she took from herself. I opened my notebook and wrote, You can't rob a man who's already given up what doesn't matter. Ethan stepped outside quietly. Can't sleep, old men don't sleep. We review, he chuckled. You're starting to sound like a philosopher. I'm just an architect, I said. But some structures live inside the mind. He sat beside me, looking at the river. Do you ever wish things had gone differently? I thought for a long time before answering. No. Because the truth was always there. We just needed the wrong person to reveal it. He nodded slowly, his face calm under the moonlight. The kind of calm that comes when the storm inside finally runs out of thunder. When dawn broke, I found him outside, coffee cup in hand, staring at the water. She's gone, he said quietly. And I don't feel empty anymore. That's how you know it's over, I said. What is the part of you that kept waiting for her to change? He smiled, small but steady. You were right, Dad. The river doesn't lie. No, I said, watching it flow past. It only reflects what we bring to it. And for the first time since this began, we both felt weightless, not because we escaped the pain, but because we'd finally learned how to carry it differently. It arrived on a Thursday morning, no name, no return address, just my own written in fading ink. The envelope felt familiar before I even opened it. The handwriting was hers. Elegant, controlled, deceptively calm. Inside a single sheet of paper, one line. You may have taken my secret, John, but you'll never forget me. I stared at the words for a long time, not because of what they said, but because of how small they looked now. Months ago, that sentence would have burned through me. Today, it just sat there, empty. Ethan found me standing by the window, letter in hand. What's that old noise? I said. From her, I nodded. He frowned. What does she want to be remembered? And will you? I already do. Just not the way she hopes. He studied my face for a while, maybe expecting anger or regret. But there was nothing left to offer her. She'd taken enough already. My home, my peace, my son's faith. The only thing she couldn't touch was the quiet I'd built since. I folded the letter once, twice, then dropped it into the fireplace. The flame caught instantly, curling her words into ash. Ethan watched, silently. You're just going to burn it. Yes. Why not keep it for evidence? Evidence of what I said softly. That she still needs an audience. He nodded, understanding, slowly sinking in. When the paper was gone, I poked at the embers, watching them fade to dust. The smell of burnt ink filled the room, bitter, final, honest. Dad, Ethan said quietly, I don't think I could have handled it like you did. You could have, I replied. You just needed to lose enough to stop trying to win. He looked at me curiously. You ever wish she'd apologize? No, I said. Apologies fix mistakes. She built her life on design. Every lie has a blueprint, every deceit a floor plan. But the truth, Ethan, the truth doesn't need walls to stand. He smiled faintly, that weary smile of someone who'd begun to understand peace isn't about victory. When he left the room, I stared into the last flicker of fire and whispered to no one. You were right, Clara. I'll never forget you. But memory isn't mercy. The flame died quietly, leaving only smoke curling toward the ceiling, like a ghost trying to escape, but finding no way out. And just like that, the house felt lighter again. Not because she was gone, but because she finally had nowhere left to live. Not even in me. Months passed. Seasons changed without ceremony. The river kept flowing, carrying everything that refused to stay still. Ethan moved into a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy. 2 rooms, one of them filled with light. He called it his clean start. I helped him fix the door frame one afternoon. It wasn't square. You built this crooked, I teased. He smiled. Guess I'm still learning. You'll learn faster when it's your own foundation. We didn't talk about Clara anymore. Not because we'd forgotten, but because the story had already told us everything it needed to. Pain had run its course. What was left was clarity. At night, I often sat by the river alone. The world seemed quieter now, or maybe I'd just stopped listening for noise that didn't matter. The moon reflected off the water, shimmering like something half true but still beautiful. People say justice needs to be loud to matter. They're wrong. Justice is patient. It waits. It doesn't chase, it reveals. I used to think revenge was the only closure. But vengeance is just grief wearing a sharper suit. It looks powerful until you realize it doesn't rebuild anything. Clara's gone now. Maybe under a new name. Maybe with new lies. I don't wish her harm. I don't wish her peace either. Some souls need to walk their own deserts until they're ready to stop thirsting for control. What I do wish is that she remembers what truth felt like just once, even for a second. I've stopped keeping folders, stopped drawing blueprints. These days I build smaller things, shelves, chairs, small pieces of wood that stay where you put them. They don't betray you. They don't pretend to love you back. They just exist solid and honest. Sometimes Ethan visits, bringing dinner or silence. Both are welcome. He's different. Now, softer, steadier, the kind of man who's learned that heartbreak doesn't break you. It just redefines where you stand. One evening, as we watched the sunset over the water, he asked, "Dad, do you ever think you lost too much?" I smiled. You can't lose what you let go of willingly. He nodded, eyes reflecting the fading light. You really forgive her. Forgiveness isn't about her, I said. It's about me. I don't carry what doesn't belong to me anymore. The wind moved through the trees, whispering something that sounded like relief. When Ethan left that night, I stayed outside. The river whispered in its own language. Steady, unhurried, eternal. I realized then that justice doesn't shout. It doesn't demand applause. It breathes. It endures. It arrives exactly when it's meant to. And when people ask what I took with me that night, when she screamed for me to get out of my own house, I tell them this: I took the truth. And that's more permanent than any home.